Alright, hello everyone and welcome to my video for the day. The question I want to pose to you first, just starting out, is Gates, so I'm first going to respond to Gates's article, is Gates saying that reason is freedom or not? And do you agree with him? Sort of applying on different theorists. So thinking about, we've been asking this sort of underlying question a lot throughout the semester of what is freedom, and that a lot of these different theorists are trying to figure out, okay, what is freedom? And a lot of them have come up with, especially during the Enlightenment, like Kant and Hegel, Durkheim too, that reason is freedom. Reasoning for its own sake, having knowledge, being able to progress, to move forward, to guide society, to move society, to change society, to understand society so we can guide it. What I think is really interesting about this article is that he is pushing on that and saying that reason actually, okay, sure, for white people it does, but for black people it actually might end up being bondage, and that there's sort of no way to get to freedom even with reason. So sort of tapping into the conversation you, Danny, and you, Maddie, were having of, I think that's sort of the questions you guys were asking. Maddie sort of saying that Gates is saying reason is freedom, and Danny, it sounded like you were saying reason is not freedom. And I'm going to be an annoying diplomat and sort of go in the middle and say I think he's sort of proposing both. I think he's saying that reason could kind of be, in theory, like we're hoping it is freedom, and that it can be for people who are black, but that it hasn't been, and that in reality that it hasn't worked out that way. So first I want to talk about on page 522, he sort of, at the beginning of the article, sets up his argument by saying, for literacy, as I hope to demonstrate, is the emblem that links racial alienation with economic alienation. So I think that is actually, I mean, like, kind of clearly maybe like on Danny's argument that reason is not freedom and it's bond, and it creates that alienation, at least. And so sort of he sort of goes through all the different reasons of how this came about. Like, first there's this idea of like natural difference between blacks and whites and other races in general. I forget who it is that said that like really upsetting thing or whatever. Like, I'm not gonna go there. So natural difference, and then there's this natural difference, and then through the Enlightenment they were thinking a lot about that we see reason, voice, writing, and as intelligence, and we see intelligence as valued humanity. So okay, if that's the case, then, and so there's clearly this division, they're saying, between people who are white and black, and okay, if someone on page 523 says blacks were reasonable and hence men if and only if they demonstrated mastery of the arts and sciences, the 18th century's formula for writing. So in theory, that's sort of the freedom, reason is freedom, and that's going to work. But then he concludes his article by saying, okay, that's actually not what happens. So we have these 5 authors that are linked by the revision of a trope on page 526 into the very first chain of black signifiers, implicitly signify upon another chain the metaphorical great chain of being. And so that, okay, so there's this chain, we have these 5 great letters, like, who are black and, like, can sort of achieve this freedom by reason, but then he says, their collective act gave birth to the black literacy tradition and defined it as the others chain, the chain of black being as a people themselves. So that, okay, we're kind of hoping for this thing, but actually instead of creating reason as freedom, it's creating this divide. And so then he articulates that really well, sort of in the, and sort of like brings that home in the bottom of the second to last paragraph, where he says, black writing, and especially the literature of the slave, served not to obliterate the difference of race, Rather, the inscription of the Black voice in Western literatures has preserved those very cultural differences to be repeated, imitated, and revised in a separate Western literary tradition, a tradition of Black difference. So that it doesn't achieve that freedom. It creates this divide, and I think that is going back to directly what he says at the beginning, sort of that framework of that economic alienation equals that racial alienation. So that's so it's not freedom because of the alienation that exists. And the dominant discourse and dominant freedom and intelligence and all of that stuff where all the power is would be with the whites. So if there's an alienation of the two, and this is certainly rambling and I'm not 100% sure on this, but if there's an alienation of the two and whites have the power, then that would be not freedom for blacks because there's alienation not only from others, but from the power. I'm not sure if that part makes sense. But yeah, so that's basically what I think. So my question for you is, does reason equal freedom or bondage? And how does Gates argue that, and how would you argue that? And I'm going to show you this one. So if you want to look at it, it was kind of blurry before and I couldn't get it. So this is sort of the chart of like the main question I'm asking. I think the main question he's posing. And then okay, cool. See you soon.